This is the Hugh Hewitt Show. I'm Alex Marlowe. Dwayne, should I say morning glory, evening grace? I probably should. And why not? It's such a classic intro. Alex Marlowe here, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, host of the Alex Marlowe Show podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, and on the Salem Podcast Network, as well as the Salem News Channel on weekends. And we got a very busy day today. Always a pleasure to be in Hugh's mighty shoes. I'll tell you, Hugh and I connected over my book, Breaking the Law, which came out a couple of months ago. New York Times bestseller, so thanks to all of you who've shown it some support. And I'll tell you, a lot of what I wrote about in the book is very relevant this week. In particular, the conclusion, where the main conclusion I drew is that for those of you who are concerned about this country, concerned about the future of our constitutional republic, then the number one thing you can do is to stay engaged 24/7. We need to be ever vigilant, and we need to stay on that wartime footing. We cannot afford to rest on our laurels and drop the ball politically. And that's really what happened this week. Even just 2 months after my good friend Charlie Kirk was assassinated in cold blood in broad daylight, conservative voters did not turn out to the polls, which is disappointing. I can't say entirely unexpected, and I'll break that down. But the main thing that we need to do at this moment is to stay engaged, to stay fired up, and to make sure that we're focused on the best issues, the top tier issues that are of value to as many people as possible. And I don't think we've done that entirely effectively, particularly this summer. But really, over the last year, it has not been our best year in terms of maintaining that energy, even though a lot of things are going well. We're going to be talking a lot about some of these things on the show, but just as a setup, I want to give you my personal conclusions, the things that I took away from the Republicans' disappointment this week in the elections. And the first one, that base energy is needed, and we did nothing to keep the base energy up. People are deeply concerned about the economy. They're deeply concerned about quality of living, affordability, and we did not message effectively on any of that. And part of this is that we did not run great candidates. And I was rooting very hard for a lot of people. I refrained from any criticism of conservative Republican candidates in the run-up to the election, even though some of them were disappointing to me. Jack Ciattarelli and Winsome Earl-Sears did not talk to us at Breitbart News at all, which Breitbart typically has been due north for the base of the movement for the last decade plus. Didn't have any interaction with them at all, which I found to be surprising and short-sighted in the long run. And I think if they'd performed better, then some of the down-ticket races would have gone better as well. Winsome Earl-Sears, in particular, wasn't just someone who was not a MAGA person, but she had run hard against Trump. She had said he needed to exit the stage politically, and is someone who had pretty much endorsed, I think, every other credible opposition candidate to Trump in the primary in 2024, and never really was able to fully make it right with him, but in particular, Trump's voters, because those low propensity voters is, I think, really what we missed out on the election on Tuesday. And the reason why this makes such a big difference is because the left is fired up to vote against Trump, to vote against MAGA. They see him as the biggest villain of the century. And because of that, they're going to be fired up and excited to go vote against him however they see it. And so we need to harness the positive energy that Trump can provide. We didn't do any of that. And that was a problem. So we did not run great candidates, which is a problem. But we also did not run on the issues that set us up to be that populist energy that Trump brought. Whether or not you're a populist person, I know the Hughes audience is going to be varied in this regard, but just know that energy was vital to our coalition, and it wasn't there. And instead, we let the left co-opt some of it with their horrible ideas and their appeals to socialism. The affordability push, in particular, was really big in New York. Now, the New York race was unique. It's obviously a deep blue area, and Andrew Cuomo is just about the worst politician in America. I was reminded with a guest, Ryan Gradusky, on the Alex Marlowe Show that aired yesterday, that he was explaining how Cuomo never had actually a tough race in his life. He basically won in a walk every single time because he has that dynastic figure with the pedigree from Mario Cuomo, and he never really was challenged, and that was why he probably ran such a low-energy race. But recall his COVID nursing home policies where he crammed all of these sick elderly people into nursing homes, confined spaces with not sick people, and then all of them died during the coronavirus. Then he gave these press conferences about it where he won an Emmy for those press conferences, and then he reportedly felt up the Emmy in front of his staff, noting that it's buxom. And that's all we could do to oppose socialism coming to America's biggest, most populous city. So obviously that was not good. But Mamdani did something that I think is really noteworthy, and that he made the pitch that he was the person who could bring back affordability to American life. And in particular, it wasn't just these immigrant communities that people talked about that drove the election. A lot of them did. And specifically, certain types of immigrants, not European immigrants, not East Asian immigrants, but certain immigrants were vital to his coalition. But there was also the credentialed class. In particular, educated white women were really the biggest driver of his success. And he's making a pitch to these people who felt like the American dream, maybe they'd gotten left behind. Maybe that the American dream was no longer achievable for them because they're in too much debt, they spend too much time getting degrees, and now they're trapped in this renter culture where everyone's borrowing. No one's growing anything, no one's earning enough to get to the next level. And he was saying, well, I've got your back, and we're going to do it with government-run grocery stores and free childcare if you ever have any kids. And the second part of the pitch is not going to resonate with you. It doesn't resonate with me, obviously. But the first part is what's key, is that he was trying to court people who feel like the American dream is not happening for them. And these were people who I think were part of Trump's coalition in a lot of times, who are not necessarily committed Republicans, but in the past have been part of MAGA. And I think that's a really important thing to note, is that we need to make sure that we're not just crying in our beer or saying, well, it was all blue states, there's no lessons here. There were a lot of vital lessons here. And now the Democrats are feeling very invigorated. We're going to talk a lot about government shutdown today, where we're at on this, how we get the government open. And a lot of this is based off of the things have changed. Here's cut. Let me play cut 6 there, Dwayne. Are you ready for me? Let's play cut. This is Richard Blumenthal. Check this out.
There is no reason to surrender now, every reason to stand firm.
Exactly. And Chris Murphy, cut 8, please.
I think there will be some pretty substantial damage done to a Democratic brand that has been rehabilitated if, on the heels of an election in which the people told us to keep fighting, we immediately stop fighting. If we surrender without having gotten anything, and we cause a lot of folks in this country who had started to believe in the Democratic Party to retreat again, I worry that it will be hard to sort of get them back up off the mat in time for next fall's election cycle.
So you see it. That's where they're at. They're thinking they're not going to cave Republicans now. They've got the momentum. Granted, none of these elections were ones Republicans were supposed to win, but, we're losing some of them by huge blowout margins. It should cause deep concern. That's why I come back to the conclusion of breaking the law, where I'm saying the only way to protect this country, to protect our republic, is to stay engaged 24/7. We can't take elections off. And that also involves making sure new members of our coalition feel like they're being spoken to. And that's why we're going to talk about affordability. Trump's back on affordability. We got a clip of that coming up. We're going to get into all this stuff today on today's show. But that is the message. And if the Democrats win, they win this midterm, the last 2 years of Trump's historic presidency is going to be spent fending off impeachments and all sorts of crazy Democrat investigations, a bunch of clock eating, wasting our time. Important stuff. And that'll be probably the centerpiece of a couple hours today, the Hugh Hewitt Show. I want to tell you about what President Trump is doing to lower the cost of health care. He's holding Big Pharma accountable for ripping off the American people. But Big Pharma and its army of lobbyists are working overtime to keep Americans paying the world's highest prescription drug prices. They've already hiked prices on hundreds of medicines this year while flooding us with billions in misleading ads for drugs we may not need. Worse yet, Big Pharma pushes government mandates designed to stack the deck in their favor. The goal in Washington is simple: escape accountability, block free market competition, and jack up outrageous prices. That means more government intrusion, bigger profits for them, and higher costs for families and businesses. Conservatives for lower healthcare costs warns the Big Pharma agenda would stick Americans and employers with billions in higher premiums and drug costs. President Trump isn't backing down. His administration is cracking down on drug companies that gouge Americans and mislead patients with obnoxious advertising. Meanwhile, conservatives in Congress are introducing reforms to stop Big Pharma's games that block generics and keep prices high. You can join us in this fight. Visit pharmawindfall.com today, pharmawindfall.com today to help lower drug prices. Eli Lake is on with me. He's got the Breaking History podcast. He's a writer, commentary, and the Free Press. Eli, really nice to make your acquaintance. And I want to start with...
Yeah, I've been a fan for a long time, Alex.
Really? That's kind of you to say. I feel like I've read thousands of your articles over the years. And there's a few really important things to get into. First thing, though, I want to just get a sense of it. Just, can I be a fly on the wall? What's it like at the Free Press post the CBS sale?
I I would tell you that nothing much has changed for most of the writers. Barry is, as I think, the busiest woman in the world right now, like, because she's still doing. I still get texts from her, and she's running CBS News and she's running the Free Press. So, um, she's an incredibly talented person and with a lot of energy, and it's good. But I would say for most of us, we're still plugging away, and the website is growing, so it's great, and we're working it out. We're now part of one big Paramount family.
Well, it does sound like a lot of work. I will say that, but I like everything I'm seeing on paper. Seems great that she's doing. So, and she's moving fast, which is important. So good. Okay. Well, if we meet again, you can keep me posted. But I want to start with something that's interesting. That is, you're a perfect person to talk to. There's this sort of fissure on the online right over Israel and how much we're supposed to talk about Israel and the Jews. And it's a tough one for me but again, it's also an easy one for me because at Breitbart, we're very pro-Jew, pro-Israel. We have a Star of David in our Jerusalem Bureau's logo. So everyone knows where we stand on this. So I've kind of opted out on some of this. But this is where I want to start, is how much of Twitter is real life? Because if you go on my feed, every other comment is something either pro or against the one Jewish state on earth. And there's a lot of time is being spent on this. And what is your assessment?
That is a great question, Alex. And what I would say is that it's a little bit of both, because on the one hand, you're right. Twitter is not real life. And there is a kind of, quality to the discourse, you could say, that you wouldn't find in real life. And it doesn't necessarily reflect where, American voters are. On the other hand, we are living in an era where a lot of our political leaders are very online, and in particular, I think Vice President J.D. Vance, a lot of, based Mike Lee, the senator from Utah. So there is a sense where it may not be real life in the sense of where American voters are, but it matters a great deal to people who are in the media and people who are in the political space. And you can't, people used to say, I just put Twitter down, it's a big waste of time. You can't do that, as you know, if you're a journalist, because that's where the conversation's happening. And we now are like, I think this started happening a few years back, but now we can say that, members of Congress are on Twitter too, and the vice president's on Twitter. So so in that respect, that is real, and it does matter. It is the kind of place where you'd have this conversation. I think of it, I don't know if I might be a little older than you, but when I started in the 90s, the late 90s in journalism, the place where you would have it out kind of politically would be the op-ed pages of the big papers, and then like magazines like the New Republic and the National Review and the Nation. Yeah. And that's where you would have these debates, but there were filters to it. These columns would be edited. You'd
have to wait for the National Review to come out to see where we're at on certain issues.
Right. Exactly, and that kind of thing. So now it's all just kind of instant and at once, and you can get the instant reaction to something. So when Kevin Roberts puts out, the first statement, which I thought, was a mistake, and I thought it was somewhat atrocious, there was an immediate response, and you know what I mean? And then he adjusted, and he put out another thing on Twitter explaining that Nick Fuentes is a terrible anti-Semite, and then he kind of went to Hillsdale, and then he gave another video statement, and then he met with the staff, so you can sort of see, whereas I kind of think, like, in a pre-social media era, there would have been, he probably wouldn't have even done it, if you think about it, right? Like, he wouldn't have
that has to be one of the worst. The first one had to be just about the worst hostage video I've ever seen. I don't even know who put him up to it. I mean, it must have been some donor or something, but I don't know why he felt compelled to do that. So, but this is what's happening for me, which is kind of a curiosity, is that a lot of these voices that are ostensibly conservative and certainly of conservative audiences, they're not behaving as conservatives, but they're certainly of conservative audiences. They're spending 75% of their time on Israel, which is very obsessive. And then if you respond to them, they accuse you of talking about Israel too much, which is just very, very strange. So I'm sort of torn about what to do with it. Is this the sort of thing where you take it head on, as Ben Shapiro is doing, or is it something where hopefully this is a passing fancy and then we can go back talking about a variety of topics, not just Israel all the time?
Well, I would love to go back to a variety of topics and not just talking about Israel all the time. So let me just put my vote in for that. But the issue is, I think, and I hear what you're saying about it's not a foreign policy fight within the MAGA coalition anymore. I think it
Yeah.
started as a foreign policy fight. I think it's an identity question now. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is that if all you wish to say is that we've had all of these forever wars, and I don't think America should be doing nation building, and we should be focusing on our problems at home and securing the border. Well, that's like a policy debate, and there can be people inside the Republican Party and the conservative movement and MAGA that disagree with you, but that's not like, you'll work it out, and Trump will
Right.
decide or whatever. Now we're really the Israel issue for what I would just simply call the anti-Semitic right is not about Israel. It's about whether Jews and Christians who support Israel can be, part of political discourse. Can they, in fact, be part of the Republican Party? Can they advocate their views, or are they stalking horses for a foreign power? Which is a failure, and if you want to be most charitable, it's a failure of imagination to understand that there might be another argument as to why patriotic Americans also support Israel. But I think in a lot of cases, like in the case of Nick Fuentes, it's a sinister, ancient hatred. It's an ancient bigotry. And it's just manifested itself as a kind of foreign policy fight. But it's not a foreign policy fight. It's a values fight. And that's why I think that the interview with Fuentes, which was more than just a podcast.
Tucker's interview,
that represented an inflection point. Because if you're gonna, as to use the Ben Shapiro phrase, if you're gonna gloss Nick Fuentes and pretend he's just a misunderstood kid, and you're gonna ignore all the terrible things that he said about you yourself, in order to do that, then you're sending a much bigger signal. Given that Tucker is now more than just a podcast host, I think I love that phrase. Yeah, he's a big deal on the right now, and that
a really striking moment in that was when Tucker said the worst people in the world are Christian Zionists, and I've gotten along with Tucker over the years, and I'm a Christian Zionist and have been my entire life, so it's just kind of odd. Like I'm worse than like Hitler lovers. It's very, very strange. Eli, I got about 30 seconds left. So what do we do?
Worse than Mamdani?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So what do we do? By the way, Breaking History podcast, catch his commentary at the Free Press and Commentary. 30 seconds. What do we do going forward on this issue?
Well, I think right now the people kind of make their voices heard. Until now, the loudest people in the room were the Groypers who follow Fuentes and the people who wanted to turn this into a big thing. And now I think we're going to start seeing the people like Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro leading the way in a lot of senses, and Breitbart as well. They're going to say, wait a second, there are going to be consequences if you are going to go here. You're going to hear from the rest of us, and we're also part of it.
Thanks, Eli. Let's do this again soon. Joining me now is Matt Continetti, Wall Street Journal columnist and a scholar at the AEI, American Enterprise Institute. Matt, nice to make your acquaintance, and I'm glad you're here. I want to start with your takeaways from the election on Tuesday. What do you think are the big things that people should pull from that?
Well, I think there are two big takeaways, Alex, and it's nice to meet you too. The first is that the affordability issue stings Republicans right now.
Clearly, right away on that.
Yeah, drove a lot of the Democratic victories. Bad solutions like Mamdani offers, whether it's the rent freezes or the free buses or the communist-style government-run grocery stores, they're fool's gold. They're not going to work. They won't make life more affordable. But they beat nothing. And I think that the alternatives in these elections had very little to say about affordability and cost of living. And so Republicans need a cost of living agenda, and they need it quick. And the other main takeaway for me is I often look at independent voters. They swing, and they've swung hard against the Republicans. And Republicans can overcome that when Republican turnout is considerable. And that's what happened last year. Republicans dominated the electorate last year, and it was a great cycle for President Trump and the Republican Party. But Republican turnout plunged in the off-year elections this week, and that meant that Democrats and independents dominated the field, and independents went toward the Democratic candidates by double digits. that's a recipe for Republican defeat. Republicans are going to have to either increase their turnout or attract some of those independents back, kind of stanch their launches if they want to have a good midterm cycle next year.
Wow, Dwayne, I bet you're liking that, because that's pretty much my exact opening. Was not as concisely as you summed it up, Matt, but that was basically the main takeaways: is we have to keep lower propensity voters engaged, and we had no message on affordability. But there's a unique thing in New York where we didn't have a candidate, conservatives didn't have a candidate that had a legitimate chance to win. But let's say we did. What is the message on affordability that you think is going to resonate, particularly with those low propensity voters, independent voters, people who may have voted for Trump but aren't necessarily card-carrying GOP members?
Well, the first thing you have to do is say that you're on the job now. I worry that a lot of our discussions of affordability look in the rearview mirror. And so we'll hear that, well, inflation has come down. And that's true. Inflation has come down, but it's still above target. And we can't forget that inflation is cumulative. Each price increase makes the next month's price increase feel a little bit worse. So the argument that, well, things are getting better isn't quite the same as the argument that we're doing something right now to lower your costs. And there I think that President Trump has pivoted very effectively and very quickly with his announcements of the new cost reductions for the GLP-1s that he had in the White House yesterday. That's a type of action on lowering costs that people like and that is in the headlines now. And I think also more attention to falling gas prices. That's good, but we also have to form some type of agenda to make sure that healthcare costs and housing costs fall as well. And from my point of view, Alex, the way to make healthcare and housing fall is through programs that increase competition and consumer choice. So I think if Republicans have an agenda that says, look, this is what we want to do to make energy prices fall, housing prices fall, healthcare prices fall, by unleashing the consumer, your power as an individual, that will give them a banner to carry in the next election. And that was a banner that was missing this week.
Yeah, and Mamdani had a really good sleight of hand for the Democrats where he would go out and he would say, well, the prices haven't come down. It's like, well, we never promised prices would come down. We promised inflation would go down, but no one catches that stuff. And that's why he's very skilled and why he was able to message pretty effectively. So what do you make of the fact that Trump seemed to be on the ballot for Democrat voters, but not on the ballot for Republican voters? And that puts us in a pretty precarious spot heading into the midterm election.
Yeah. In some ways, it's similar to what happened to the Democratic Party under Barack Obama. When Obama was at the top of the ticket, the Democrats did well. When he wasn't on the ticket, the Democrats suffered. And we've seen that throughout the Trump era. When President Trump is at the top of the ticket and campaigning and in the fight, Republicans turn out. When he's not at the top of the ticket, a lot of Republicans feel that they don't really have a dog in the hunt. And so somehow Republicans need to harness President Trump, make it about President Trump as much as the Democrats. That might get people to the polls.
I got some fresh humor audio that producer Dwayne likes, so let's play a little bit of this, Dwayne.
Reopens. Therefore, we'd like to offer a simple proposal that would reopen the government and extend the ACA premium tax credits simultaneously, and then have the opportunity to start negotiating longer-term solutions to health care costs. Let's do all three. I've spoken with my caucus, and Democrats are offering a very simple compromise. Democrats are ready to clear the way to quickly pass a government funding bill that includes health care affordability. Leader Thune just needs to add a clean one-year extension of the ACA tax credits to the CR so that we can immediately address rising health care costs. That's
all right.
not a negotiation.
I think that's the gist of it. That's the main point, Matt. I want to get your take on that in particular. So 1 year Obamacare extension. I don't know if the Republicans would have any interest in going along with this. I highly doubt it. Apparently, John Thune has indicated he's not interested. But I wanted your assessment overall. Let's go forests and we'll go back to trees. So where do you think we're at on the shutdown? Who do you think is messaging more effectively on it, and what do you think? How do you think this thing gets resolved?
Sure. Well, we're entering the part of the shutdown where pain is really going to start being inflicted upon Americans. I barely escaped the free state of Florida, though I would like to stay, by catching a flight back to D.C. in the swamp yesterday. And the flight cancellations, as Secretary Duffy says, are just going to get worse. And that's really going to affect Americans, especially as we approach Thanksgiving. There's already this huge disruption for the food stamps that a lot of governors, Democrats and Republicans, feel is hurting their voters. They'd like to see that those benefits restored. And I think it's only going to grow worse as the shutdown continues. Military, I think, is scheduled to miss their first paycheck next week, and that's just unacceptable. That said, the public doesn't have a definitive ruling on who to blame. The polls show that most people are blaming Republicans, but it's not by that considerable a margin. And as we know, most polls lean Democrat anyway. But what that says to me is Republicans need to do a better job pinning this shutdown on the Democrats. They really need to pull out some of the old stage tricks that Clinton and Obama used during previous shutdowns. Go to the airport like Secretary Duffy did. I think he did a good job today. Say that this is because the Democrats refused to open the government. That's why. That if the Republicans can be more effective on that measure, pinning the Democrats, putting the pressure on the Democrats, then I think we'll get closer to resolving this. The Schumer offer, of course, is a non-starter. And I think that the Thune's answer should have been to quote Michael Corleone from The Godfather 2 and just say, Senator, my offer is this. Nothing, except you open the government.
So we have Thune's answer. He says it's a non-starter, so exact phraseology you used. I think it's an indication that they're feeling the heat and they know that their last proposal is unserious and unrealistic. So I guess you could characterize that as progress, but I just don't think that it gets anywhere close to what we need to do here. Straightforward, but I feel like the Democrats think they're winning after Tuesday, and that kind of shifted with me. I think they thought they were probably losing a little bit in the messaging war, but when Chuck Schumer is still under threat of a primary from AOC, maybe losing his job, I feel like he wants to stay locked in. So, and I think that he's confident that with all this flight chaos, that it's going to mean Republicans are going to get blamed.
Yeah, I think that the base is driving this, Alex, but the Schumer and other in the Democratic leadership are in fear of the progressive base that really drove a lot of the victories this week. So they're going to try to toughen it out. At the same time, I do see in Schumer's offer something of a move toward ending the shutdown. Because remember, when this started, it wasn't just renewing the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare subsidies. It was also restoring the cuts to Medicaid, or the reforms to Medicaid, I should say, that were part of the One Big Beautiful Bill. So the Democrats are lowering the ask. And, of course, they're doing it in such a devious way. He's saying, oh, we'll open up the government if you extend these benefits for a year. Well, what happens next year? The midterm election. He wants to keep these Affordable Care Act subsidies as an issue for the midterms to drive progressive turnout. Republicans can't let him have that. What they need to do is focus on the few remaining Democrats who went to states that Trump won last year. So that's Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, and New Mexico and Georgia. If you put the pressure on them, if Republicans lead messaging in their states, then we could get the government open with a clean CR pretty soon.
So what do you think is the recommendation in terms of messaging? So just go to those states and just say this is all the Democrats' fault, or is there more to it?
No, I think it's that simple, because I haven't heard that quite a bit. I mean, we've heard from Republicans that there's pain or that there's process issues. They just need to focus on labeling this shutdown the Democratic shutdown. And the more they do that, then I think Democrats might be able to feel it in their home state. The national polls are going to reflect kind of this blue energy out there. You want to go on the state basis, in particular those states that went for Trump in the last election.
Is there any carrot that either side could offer that might be some sort of a compromise where both sides feel like they got the W?
I mean, I think that'll be hard, especially because, as you pointed out, the socialists really feel emboldened after Tuesday. But I think the solution is pretty simple. You open up the government, you allow a debate and a vote on extending the Affordable Care Act plan, and that, I think, would give both sides at least something. But the fact of the matter is, it is nihilistic for the party of government, the Democratic Party, to say that causing people pain by shutting down the government gives them leverage or gives them an edge in a political fight.
That's
and
good
Republicans
stuff.
can't stand for it.
Yeah, you got to have that as part of the messaging. Absolutely, that they're playing politics with people's lives, and I think that is the messaging where I think we could win on that. Matt Continetti, wonderful stuff. Really nice to meet you. I'm going to tell you guys about Washington's broken permitting system, hurting families and America's energy security. And with demand for reliable, affordable energy surging, now is the time to act. Without comprehensive, durable permitting reform, energy producers and infrastructure developers will continue to face red tape, endless litigation, delaying and derailing projects that could make energy prices more affordable, create jobs, and increase our competitiveness with China. The American Exploration and Production Council, AXPC, represents leading independent oil and gas producers and has a blueprint for Congress to fix this broken system. Their plan modernizes outdated and weaponized permitting laws to make the process faster, more predictable, and consistent across agencies and industries. This is common sense reform, cutting bureaucracy, not environmental safeguards. Here's the reality. American-made oil and natural gas will be essential to meet growing energy demand. If we lead, we lower costs for families, secure high-paying jobs, and strengthen our national security. If we stall, our adversaries step in, and Americans pay the price with their wallets and lost opportunity. The stakes couldn't be higher. Our economy and energy dominance depend on it. See the plan for yourself. axpc.org. That's axpc.org. Check it out. You know, I've got a fresh clip of John Thune yelling about Chuck Schumer that I really want to play, but I'll play it at the top of the next hour because I think there's something really important about that read. The read gave me an important thought. We need to start talking about the things that can affect and help American peoples in their lives. And that's why I brought up with Eli about how we're just obsessively talking about Israel all the time. I'm a pro-Israel guy. I know where I stand on it. I don't need to dwell on it. It feels like they've been very helpful with their intelligence of late. And it seems like President Trump is brokering a peace in the region. I think Israel's integral to that. All seems good to me. But one thing that would be nice to talk about when it comes to not just affordability, I want to talk about permitting reform. I want it so that Americans are empowered to build stuff, to create things, and they don't have to wait for city administrators and bureaucrats to improve things. And this is something that is in where I'm at in California. It's the idea of trying to build something. It's years and years of work to move pipes around. It is completely unacceptable to a country that thinks of itself as free. And yet it gets almost no discussion. It only comes up if you've some sort of a personal gripe or grievance because you tried to go through a permitting process and then you didn't get anywhere with the city and you gave up, or maybe you got through but took years. It culturally, we want to encourage people to grow and thrive, grow the pie, not just wait for a universal basic income handout from the billionaire class after robots have replaced all of our jobs. And this is something that I think is essential to the messaging that a conservative movement, a forward-thinking conservative movement needs to have going forward. Return to freedom, and let's get rid of some of the onerous permitting bureaucrats. They talk about non-essential workers. Alex Marlow in yet again for my friend Hugh Hewitt, one of the most kind mentors you could have in the talk radio game. So glad to be in Hugh's captain chair today. And I have the Alex Marlow Show podcast, wherever you get your pods, on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple, and on the Salem News Channel on weekends. So check that out. So I want to make some connective tissue between the topics from the first hour. The first hour, I opened up discussing some of the conclusions in my best-selling book, Breaking the Law, about how we need to stay on a wartime footing. We need to stay engaged politically. And when we don't do that, then it ends up allowing for lawfare to thrive. It ends up allowing for judges to be able to control more policy, which has really been the main resistance to President Trump in his first year back in office has really come from the lawfare class. And what's going on with the government shutdown is no different. And this is a clip I want to play from Vice President Vance. He was in a White House gaggle with Viktor Orban, the Hungarian president. But this is about a judge blocking what essentially allowing for SNAP benefits to get paid out, even though there's no money for it. Let's play cut 5, please, Mr. Duane.
Yeah, look, Jackie, it's an absurd ruling because you have a federal judge effectively telling us what we have to do in the midst of a Democrat government shutdown, which what we'd like to do is for the Democrats to open up the government. Of course, then we can fund SNAP, and we can also do a lot of other good things for the American people. But in the midst of a shutdown, we can't have a federal court telling the president how he has to triage the situation. We're trying to keep as much turned on. We're trying to keep as much going as possible. The president and the entire administration are working on that, but we're not going to do it under the orders of a federal judge. We're going to do it according to what we think we have to do to comply with the law, of course, but also to actually make the government work for people in the midst of the Democrat government shutdown. If they would like to end this, we would welcome working with them to end this government shutdown, and then we wouldn't have to triage what we're going to fund and what we're not going to fund. And the last thing that I'll say is the American people are unfortunately about to start suffering some very real consequences because of the shutdown. In the past, when you had a government shutdown, you would have under the Obama administration, they would lean into all of the problems it was going to cause for the American people at the beginning of the shutdown. The president has told us to keep as much going as humanly possible. But after 30 days of this thing, 40 days of this thing, you're going to start seeing very real travel delays. That's because the Democrat government shut down. You're going to start seeing SNAP benefits run out. That's because the Democrat government shut down. They should stop this charade and open up the government. That's what we want them to do. We've been asking them to do it for 40 days. It's time.
He speaks very clearly, which is why I don't cut in. It's exactly the right summary, and I have very few notes to add, but it is noteworthy that a judge is demanding that SNAP benefits get paid out even though there's no money allocated or appropriated for those funds. And that is happening. I don't know how that's legal, how that's even possible, and it is through the foggy eyes of a left-wing judge. They can somehow see a constitutional mandate to fund stuff that hasn't yet been funded. Why? Because of politics. That's why. And that's why every election matters. Every judge race matters. And every down ballot race matters. And every off-year election matters. Because that's how the lawfare judges are getting their power, is by winning those races by catching us sleeping. All right. President Trump is on something I think is really important when it comes to why the elections didn't go so great on Tuesday. And a lot of it's the issue of affordability. And this came up at the same gaggle. So let's play cut 2, please, Mr. Duane.
Caroline?
Yes, sir.
Could you discuss that question that was asked and how it was asked in such a fake, disgusting manner by the fake news?
Yeah, and I just saw it asked again here, and it's very unfortunate that the reporters in this room refused to address, sir, what you just said, which is that you inherited the worst inflation crisis in modern American history, and you are fixing it in 10 short months, and your entire administration has been tasked with this effort, from Treasury Department to Agriculture Department to the National Economic Council right here at the White House. They are slashing regulation. He signed the largest middle-class tax cut in 6 months. In 6 months, in record time, putting more money back into the American people's pockets. So affordability is what the American people elected this president to do, and he is doing it, and you guys refuse to cover it, and you refuse to cover that the previous administration created the worst unaffordability crisis in American history. And I've been watching the TV all day saying that he doesn't want to talk about affordability. That's what he's working on every day, and that's what this administration is doing.
Right now. But you know why they refuse to cover it?
Can I
because they're fake news. That's why. Go ahead.
Can I get her someone?
Sure. Caroline, the Prime Minister would like you to work for him in Hungary.
Please consider. Please consider.
You know what? That's a very good decision you just made. Please don't leave us, Caroline.
Wow, please don't leave us. Is that a tip? Maybe she's thinking of moving on? I don't know. But whenever he goes into the fake news, I'm always tempted to break into the fake news is the enemy of the people, okay? Believe me. Like it's hard not to. The absolute classic of all Trump classics. But here's the thing. For me, I don't know how things have gotten that much more affordable. I just don't. And I know that the president, I think, has staunched the bleeding. I think he's drastically slowed down the Biden inflation. Inflation has come down significantly, not on every item, but there's on most items it has. But it's still, the world is getting more affordable, more unaffordable at a slightly slower pace, which is not great. That's just simply not great. So this is why Chuck Schumer feels like that he still has the upper hand in the shutdown. He thinks the Republicans are on their heels and they're forced to react to stuff like this. The affordability issue was, I think, the centerpiece of Mamdani's rise, acting as though he is the solutions in New York. He doesn't. His solutions are garbage. They're going to make things more expensive, and they're going to make a lot of the tax base leave. We're already seeing an exodus from New York. All that's going to happen. But they're messaging more effectively on it than conservatives, and I'm glad Trump is starting to think about it. I'm glad Caroline Leavitt is starting to think about it because they need to. So the back and forth that's gone on, as I reported last hour on the show, Chuck Schumer has offered a vote to reopen the government so long as Obamacare is extended for another year, the Obamacare subsidies. John Thune has reacted in robust fashion. Check this out.
When he's saying right here, we will pay them not only for today, but for tomorrow and for the entire year, and we won't allow them to be held hostage and be pawns in a political game in the future. And my understanding is the senator from Michigan, on behalf, I suppose, of other Democrats, is objecting to that. Please, please help me understand. This is a straightforward proposal which addresses the concern that millions of Americans have who are headed to food banks and can't pay their rent. And you're coming down here and saying you're going to object because you just want to pay them for yesterday, not for tomorrow or the next day after that. It's about leverage, isn't it? Isn't that what you all been saying? It's about leverage? This isn't leverage. This is the lives of the American people. Senator of Wisconsin has put forward a straightforward proposal to pay people, federal employees, today, tomorrow, and in the future. And what you're essentially saying is, well, I'm fine with paying them for yesterday, but we're not going to pay them for tomorrow or for the day after that.
I've never seen Senator Thune like that. That's the first time I've ever seen him get that animated. I liked it. I thought that was great. But what does that reveal?
I've only seen it twice. I've only seen him do this twice, and both in the last week because he's so frustrated at the Democrats.
So, Dwayne, what do you read into that, though? Is that from strength or weakness? Does he feel like he's fired up and he can get some positive attention?
I think he's exasperated because I know he knows there is the pressure on them to change the rules and to change the filibuster. And I know there's not a lot of will within the Republican conference to do that, but they're running out of options.
Yeah, and he's said that he's personally not for changing the filibuster rules. And I think that seems to be the general consensus, but obviously President Trump sees it differently. And I think that's another interesting spot if we find ourselves in a shutdown environment going forward. You got a prediction on that, Dwayne?
I mean, conventional wisdom says at some point this has to end because the labor unions, the Teamsters, all these groups have come out against the shutdown and are ordering the Democrats to end it. At some point, they're going to start yanking funding, right?
Yeah. Interesting. All right. We'll be right back. Hugh Hewitt Show. Alex Marlow here. By the way, I've got a big interview with Senator McCormick. I asked him some of these questions as well with the Alex Marlow Show podcast. And we're now joined by Jonathan Williams. He's the president of American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, which has shared, thousands of stories with us at Breitbart News over the years. And at Tax Economist on X, the Everything app. That's a pretty cool handle. Jonathan, nice to make your acquaintance. I'm glad you're here. Could you share with the audience what ALEC does exactly, just to kick things off?
Well, thanks. ALEC, we're busier than ever now, but we're over 50-year-old organization working with America's state legislators to pursue common sense ideas, lower taxes, limited government, this quaint idea that the founders had that's now being reinvigorated, and that's federalism, that not all good decisions happen in Washington. While we might like a lot of them happening right now with President Trump, over time, we want more decisions to happen at the state level and closer to the people. So that's what we're all about. And, dedicated to pursuing those policy ideas every single day and seeing some amazing wins for the American people.
What are you to read into conservative sort of disappointing week this week in the elections?
I think that this is, you look at history, right? And in Virginia, anyways, we have a long history. I live in Virginia now, long history in voting for the party that's not in power in the White House. So this is nothing different than what we've seen pretty much for the better part of a half century in Virginia. What I do think is interesting coming out of these elections, though, is going to be the focus on really a needed back to basics of common sense, talking about kitchen table issues, affordability, whether it's energy affordability, whether it's housing affordability, whether it's tax cuts and the need to reform property taxes. These are things that, ironically, you have this kind of whacked out socialist in Mamdani in New York running as a socialist, but talking about affordability issues. That was his main campaign theme, which is, isn't that mind blowing to think about for a second, that a socialist that wants to grow government and raise people's costs in the long term thinks it's good enough marketing right now, and the politics are good enough that he makes it his campaign theme to talk about affordability. So I think there's some key lessons for conservatives to take away from this week that otherwise was a disappointing week.
I agree with you entirely. And I think he won partially because he's a uniquely gifted politician, and I think that he was running against no one. Andrew Cuomo was a horrific candidate, and so I think that's part of it. But it is very noteworthy that he was able to win an election on affordability by saying he's going to give free stuff, by even as a lot of his tax base is now going to leave the city. But I'll tell you another factor in that election is I think we're getting increasingly illiterate as a society in our founding documents, our founding principles, and how things work. And this is where, Alec, you guys are coming in here. You've got a campaign for the 250th anniversary of the country, which is coming up next year, where you're re-engaging people with civic education. Give us the broad, big picture here.
Our States 250 effort is really an incredible moment for us to really correct what public education has failed us for so many decades now, and not teaching our children real American history, the founding documents. What is in the Declaration of Independence? What are those 1,300 magic words talking about the need for freedom and decentralized control that led, of course, to the greatest document in governance in that the world has seen in the U.S. Constitution? And so we're doubling down from an ALEC perspective to use this incredible opportunity to educate Americans on the concepts of federalism, what it means for decentralized power, and the checks and balances that brings to preserve individual freedoms and liberty that make America so great. And really the other thing that we are doing on this is, what are the key policy attributes? Is, we have a model piece of policy, one of the things that we do at ALEC, on civics education and actually teaching the original documents. And I know it's a novel concept here, but maybe make high school seniors pass the U.S. citizenship test before they graduate. So basic things like that, I think that would just go so much further. And you hear so much illiteracy when it comes to the basics of American government, where you see the man on the street interview, they can't name one of the freedoms in the Bill of Rights or the three branches of government. We've got to do better as a country, and this is an incredible opportunity that we at ALEC can help lead at the state level.
Well, if people aren't getting that sort of basic information from our schools, or schools are not able to ingrain it in people's heads, then how are people supposed to be getting educated right now? I know you guys have some solutions, but where should people turn?
Well, there's some great solutions out there. We're really excited to be a part of Secretary McMahon's 250 coalition that's going to be part of this and educating Americans on just these basic principles once again. But it really comes down to the change starts at home first. And so it's incumbent on all of us, whether it's our friends or family, or especially with our children, to be teaching what is it that makes America great and what is it that makes America unique in the course of human events. Why is it that we have so much freedom here, protecting the rights of the individual? And that freedom's at attack, whether it's going to be Mr. Mamdani in New York, whether it's going to be some bureaucrat in a state capitol or in Washington, D.C., and our unfriendly administration. That's why educating us right now and protecting these freedoms is so important, and that's why we're devoting so much time at ALEC with our men and women serving in the states leading the way on this.
You said something really interesting about power being decentralized, and that being a unique characteristic in America's republic and our system. It's contextualize that. Can you give me some color on why that system has worked so well for us?
Well, it's inherently a protection, as the founders saw it, on liberty and on individual freedom and rights. And then you go back, I encourage everybody, a challenge today is go back and read the Declaration of Independence if you haven't. 1,300 words, it's not a long read, but what struck me is the founders pointed to that strong central government in London at the time. In fact, one individual, the King of England, in the Parliament there, putting all these rights underfoot and trampling American rights. And that's, of course, why they rose up and started this great American Revolution in 1776 within the Declaration of Independence. And so, having that come full circle and teaching decentralized control, not Washington running our lives, but actually states having much more authority. And then at the ultimate level, individual self-government, right? That was the idea of the founders, is government shouldn't be making all these decisions. It should be civic institutions that should be helping us. It should be families taking care of themselves. And it should be the churches and synagogues across the United States that can provide that support. Because I think, unfortunately, we rely too much on government. It's clear to say, right? I mean, these days that we need to, I think, go back to that original founder skepticism of big government. It served them well, and we have a whole lot of work to get back to that. But I think the initiatives like this 250 is an incredible opportunity for all of us right now.
So what are you seeing in terms of these laboratories for governance, which are our states in our federalist system? What are you seeing that their contribution can be right now when we're talking about affordability in particular? What are your recommendations you feel like you're seeing that make a lot of sense for states to try at the moment?
Well, we've got some great ideas, ALEC.org and our essential policy solutions. We've got, whether you look at ways to look at property taxes and stop the runaway assessment growth of property taxes that are really taxing seniors out of their homes, stopping young individuals from being able to afford their first home. It's a travesty to stop that really part of the American dream. And so looking at ways to cap the growth of property taxes is something that we're spending a lot of time on. Also, just increasing housing supply, looking at outside the box things to reduce regulation and the cost of building new housing in the United States is a key element. And when you look at energy, for so long, whether this woke ESG style ideology that we saw from the left, whether it was the Obama or Biden administrations and the war on American energy dominance, thank God that we have President Trump and people like Secretary Chris Wright and others fighting back against that war on American energy as well.
Great answer. Jonathan Williams from ALEC. How do people get involved and stay involved?
ALEC.org. Check us out and join our cause.
All right, States 250 campaign, very cool stuff. Thanks for being here with me on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Americans for Free Markets under the Obama and Biden administrations. Regulators pressured banks to close accounts for industries and individuals they don't like. This politically motivated debanking trampled on the freedoms of American businesses and citizens, putting government in the business of punishing people it disagreed with. Thankfully, President Trump is taking decisive action to stop it. His executive order calls out regulators who abuse their power and makes clear that debanking must end once and for all. But lasting reform requires more than one order. It requires Congress to act. That's why Americans for Free Markets is thanking President Trump for standing up for freedom and urging Congress to follow his lead. Together, they can establish a national fair access standard to prevent services from being denied based on political, social, or religious views. This would bring clarity, consistency, and long overdue accountability to financial regulation. To protect the financial freedom of every American, Congress must build on President Trump's leadership, update outdated laws, and codify his executive order. Americans for Free Markets is calling on Congress to ensure the abuse of power can never happen again. You can learn more at forfreemarkets.org. That's FOR freemarkets.org. That's forfreemarkets.org. I'm trying to keep you guys with the up to the date, up to the minute government shutdown news. We played earlier in the broadcast Chuck Schumer saying that he'll vote to open the government on the Senate side so long as Republicans extend Obamacare subsidies for another year. That was the Democrat leader Schumer said that, and then John Thune, the Republican leader, came out and was screaming, hopping mad over it, saying this is not going to happen. That's a non-starter. But this is really interesting that the Jake Sherman from Punchbowl News reports that Hakeem Jeffries has consistently been opposed to a one-year extension. So the Democrats aren't even on the same page. I was trying to make sense of who actually has the upper hand here, whether or not Schumer's move to offer the one-year Obamacare extension, whether or not that's from a position of power or weakness, as I didn't have a clear read on it at the time. But if he's not even coordinated with Hakeem Jeffries on this, I'm definitely in the weakness camp, because a lot of Democrats are out there, those who want to go in front of a camera, typically those in safe seats, typically people who are on the far left, are out there saying everything is different after the Tuesday election. But the vibe I'm getting reading the tea leaves here is that things are not that much different. And in fact, maybe the Democrats are signaling that a cave could be coming. But what does that look like? And are they going to ruin Thanksgiving? That's the big question. Are they going to ruin Thanksgiving? We've already had thousands of flight delays and cancellations, and things are only going to get worse as we get into the busiest travel season of the year. But very noteworthy that Hakeem Jeffries is opposed on the House side to what Chuck Schumer has proposed on the Senate side. Congressman Pfluger, who is the Republican Study Committee chair, has said that also the one-year extension is a non-starter on the Republican side. So Thune on the Senate side, Pfluger on the House side, both saying it's a no-go for Republicans. Democrats are divided on the issue as well. So this is not a great move from Chuck Schumer. It doesn't sound like. It sounds fairly incoherent, to say the least. And that, where does that put us? That puts us pretty much exactly where we were at the start of the show. And it's just so much theatrics. It's interesting because there is so much time, so much discussion, so many hours of footage on these topics. And the bottom line is the American people are going to continue to suffer because the Congress cannot work together at all. And I find it darkly amusing from my post in conservative media getting to watch all these things take place. But it is, the level of incompetence is pretty unbelievable. And especially because Democrats, out of power, lost all three branches, both houses in the legislature, as well as the presidency last year. And they're basically holding the entire government hostage, all because Chuck Schumer is getting threatened politically from the left and might end up losing his job. So all that's happening, and we'll continue to keep you posted on The Hewitt Show and beyond. Let me tell you about Consumer Cellular. Let me ask you, have you looked at your cell phone bill lately? How much data are you really using compared to how much you're paying for? And what about those hidden fees, surcharges, and rate increases that just seem to creep up on you? Be proactive in times of uncertainty. It's time to check your bill and then check out Consumer Cellular, where you truly get savings without sacrifice. It takes only 20 minutes to switch, and right now you get $25 off when you use promo code HUGH25, HUGH25. Just call 1-800-411-4454 or visit consumercellular.com/Hugh. New customers get a $5 credit on their first 5 monthly invoices. And here's something that my 50 and over listeners love: 2 unlimited lines for just $60. That's only $30 per line. Unlimited. It's an easy way to better manage your cost of living and cut down on essential expenses. So don't wait. Get real savings without the sacrifice. Use promo code HUGH25 today or call 1-800-411-4454, consumercellular.com/Hugh. Dwayne and I were just talking about how the CBO got hacked. And that fits in very nicely with the web root tool protection. Holidays are forgiving for cyber criminals. Holidays are for taking. They are. That's right. They take. They're just takers. Cybercrime spikes during Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and over half of U.S. shoppers worry about getting scammed. Fake emails, bogus shipping notifications, and phony online stores are everywhere. One wrong click and your data could be gone. Protect yourself. WebRoot Tool Protection, the all-in-one cybersecurity identity protection solution. Get 60% off for a limited time at webroot.com/Hewitt, HEWITT. That's Hewitt. First time, a real-time antivirus firewall web threat shield to block malicious sites before you visit them. Plus, password managers, system optimizer, VPN, and identity protection that includes up to $1 million in reimbursement if your identity is stolen. This holiday season, you need WebRoot Tool Protection, our all-in-one product for individuals, 1 identity, 5 devices, and families up to 10 identities and 10 devices. Protect yourself and your family from cybercrime this holiday season with 60% off WebRoot Tool Protection at webroot.com/Hewitt, 60% off at webroot.com/Hewitt. All right, a shutdown conversation continues. President has truth bombed The United States Senate should not leave town until they have a deal to end the Democrat shutdown. If they can't reach a deal, the Republicans should terminate the filibuster immediately and take care of our great American workers. I can't tell if Trump's just messaging on this or if he really believes it, because I'm guessing he believes it, but sometimes you can't take him. You take him seriously, but not literally, to quote Selena Zito. And I think maybe he's just positioning himself. Jake Sherman from Punchbowl tweets out, one Republican senator said to me that every single GOP senator is opposed to the Democrat proposal. That makes sense. I can't see any Republicans. The Senate GOP saying that Schumer's proposal for the one-year Obamacare subsidies extension is laughable. Democrats want to give $35 billion next year to insurance companies for subsidies with no fraud controls and to benefit the wealthy. Hard no, Chuck. Straightforward. Pretty much where we were at. Okay, I got some audio I want to share with all of you to give you some context on where people are shaking out. And let's start with the President of the United States, who is gaggling with Hungarian President Viktor Orban. Cut one, please, Mr. Duane.
We have a shutdown, as you probably know, because the Democrats have gone, they're crazy. They're crazy. But they don't care if they hurt the country. But we've approved it 14 times. We've approved a opening up 14 times, and they keep rejecting it. And I guess maybe they will again. Let's see what happens. They want to have a lot of bad things happen, bad things for our country. We're not going to give $1.5 trillion to people that came into our country illegally. We're not going to do it. To people who came from prisons. They came from mental institutions. They're drug dealers. They want to give them medical care.
All right. So this has ultimately become a messaging battle. The question is, who is messaging the best on this, because both sides are locked in. And Trump saying Democrats are crazy and noting that they're the ones who are actually voting against the shutdown. Very good. Let's see how Senator Ted Cruz is messaging. Cut 12, please.
Senator Fetterman, a member of this committee, has said quite candidly, this is a Democrat shutdown. For the sake of the TSA agents, for the sake of the air traffic controllers, for the sake of the flying public, let's not test that idiot Democrat staffer who told Politico we'll keep the shutdown going until planes start falling from the sky. That's not funny. And I do believe my colleagues on the Democrat side, they don't want to see that happen. But every day that they starve the system of the resources it needs, they increase the chances of a tragedy like that occurring.
Yeah, it's important to remind everyone of that quote over and over again, that that's where the Democrats are at. And that's what they think of the American people. They just condescend to all of us all the time, that they feel like that we should be inconvenienced and we're all pawns in their political game. And it's just not the spirit of what it should mean to represent the public. And yet they have so few defections. It just sounds like Fetterman, that's basically it. And let's see if some people come around. All right, here is Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, cut 14.
Most of the controllers can navigate missing one paycheck. Virtually none of them can navigate missing two paychecks. That second paycheck comes this Tuesday. And so if this shutdown doesn't end relatively soon, the consequence of that is going to be more controllers don't come to work, and then we're going to have to continue to assess the pressure in the airspace and make decisions that may, again, move us from 10% to 15%, maybe to 20%. I don't want to see that. Or, by the way, if controllers start coming to work and the pressure goes down, we can move those numbers in the other direction. Again, this is a moment-by-moment assessment. Again, doing all we can to make sure travelers are safe as they move through the airspace.
Man, the picture there on the screen is of Los Angeles International Airport, the worst airport in the world, and a place that I unfortunately spend way too much time. And that's triggering. Dwayne, you got to give me a trigger warning next time you put up a picture of LAX, please, on the screen. I can't handle that, especially on a Friday.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine LAX now with like 30 fewer air traffic control? What a nightmare that's going to be.
No, I can't.
It's going to be a nightmare.
You think it couldn't get worse than it is on a normal Tuesday. Yeah,
it can.
Yes, it can. It's exactly right. All right, speaking of airlines, American Airlines COO David Seymour on ABC. Check this one out.
First thing I want to say is I want to thank all of the federal workers, all of our air traffic controllers, our TSA officers, our CBP officers, and all the people that support them for coming in and working like they are without pay. It is incredible what they're doing and ensuring that our aviation system is safe. Now, I also thank our team who's doing everything during this shutdown here to ensure that we are minimizing the disruption and making sure that our customers are always the center of our focus and attention on how we manage through this. But let me be clear. We need to get the government reopened. We need to get this aviation system back, and I implore our members of Congress to get together and get the government reopened so we can get back to normalcy. Aviation is super critical to this nation. It's super critical to our traveling public.
It is so important to emphasize that no one knows exactly what the Democrats want. They want more Obamacare. They want health care for illegal aliens, but they won't own up to it. They're not in control. They lost the House. They lost the Senate. They lost the executive branch in the last election. The people spoke, and they were not for more Democrat rule. And yet they're the ones who are saying that you must comply with our demands or all this inconvenience happens. All these Americans are made to be inconvenienced. And the Republicans are left in this position that are we supposed to cave to this political terrorism here and blink and try to take the moral high ground? Or are we supposed to have a war of attrition with people who are pros at winning them every single time? Very odd spot that we find ourselves in, and we're going to keep giving you the up-to-the-minute information at Breitbart.com, of course, and on the Hugh Hewitt Show. All right, we don't have government, but we have poetry. And Tarzana Joe is here, the poet laureate, at Tarzana Joe on X, the Everything app. Tarzana Joe, what do you got for us this week?
Well, Hugh Hewitt has often said that America is essentially a center-right country with center-left leadership. But that opinion is being challenged now by all what's going on and around the country. But it was also challenged a century ago. A poet spoke, and we were told the center, he said, cannot hold. He showed a world beset by woe in words 100 years ago. The best are cowed and frightened. The worst are full of rage. Could this be a signal for the last and final age? The echoes of that first great war were still in spirits drumming. Did anarchy and ignorance demand the second coming? But would that second coming bring, when loosed upon creation, the splendor of forgiveness or the horrors of damnation? He didn't give it a meaning, he didn't give it a name, but seemed to say we must accept whatever future came. But there is hope, expressed in ways, as I, for you, now paraphrase. A century has come and gone, and he might be elated. We missed the demolition that he anticipated. 1,000 innovation and many years of thinking saved us from the whirlpool in which he saw us sinking. Despite a worldwide battle, we moved ahead undaunted to bring forth a society that men and women wanted. Today, is there a hero, a pundit, or inventor to light imagination and somehow save the center? That's Saving the Center by Tarzana Joe.
Tarzana Joe, that was wonderful. TarzanaJoe.com for your stuff. Give me your take on poetry that doesn't rhyme, because I'm just going to go flat out. I'm against it. It's got to rhyme for me. It's got to rhyme for me. What do you think?
I think the right words in the right order, always in the right order, can move without rhyme. But I think rhyme is what built the pyramids. It's the way people memorize and pass on essential information. Fahrenheit 451, nothing without rhyme, or structure. So rhyme is structure, structure is thought, thought is salvation. Did I summarize that for you?
That was incredible. I'm so glad I asked. I've been hearing these segments for so long. Tarzana Joe, where should people go to keep up with your stuff?
TarzanaJoe.com, and if they want a poem, they can just click on I want a poem, fill out the form, I'll get right back to them. We'll get together and collaborate on something. And if they want a stocking stuffer for Christmas, buy my book, which is also at TarzanaJoe.com.
I was going to say, how about a poem for Christmas? It might be a splurge, but some of you can afford it. I know in Hugh's audience. Hugh's got a powerful audience. All right, guys, that's it for me. We got the Hillsdale Hour next hour. Dr. Larry Arnn, who I got to see in person just a couple weeks ago. Maybe I'll tell that story on Monday. I'm Alex Marlow. Alex Marlow Show podcast, wherever you get your podcast, Breitbart.com. Breaking the Law. Hugh's new favorite book is out now, New York Times bestseller.